All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today we are diving deep into the absolutely epic 150-year story of America's wild ride with oil. I mean, it's a story of incredible power, then crippling dependence, and finally a comeback that nobody saw coming. Okay, get a load of this number. 13.6 million barrels. That is the insane amount of crude oil the U.S. cranks out every single day. And this isn't just about being a major player. No, this makes the U.S. the undisputed #1 top dog producer on the entire planet. It's a lot. So how on earth did we get here? Well, it was anything but a straight line. It's this incredible drama of rising to the top, then falling into this deep dependency, and then, boom, rising again in a way that honestly almost nobody predicted. So yeah, let's unpack how it all went down.
So our story kicks off not where you might think. Not in the deserts of the Middle East, but actually in the hills of Pennsylvania. This is where a brand new industry was born, one that would, quite literally, fuel the entire modern world.
Okay, so check this out. What's absolutely wild here is just how fast one company, led by one guy, basically took over this whole new resource. We're talking about John D. Rockefeller. In just a little over a decade, he went from starting a company to completely controlling the industry. That's fast.
So what was Rockefeller's secret sauce? Well, his genius wasn't really about drilling for the oil itself. It was about controlling everything else, the whole chain. He owned the refineries, he owned the pipelines, he owned the transport. So if you wanted to move oil, process it, or sell it, guess what? You had to go through him. It was a masterclass in control.
In this chart, it just lays it all out, plain and simple. The result of that strategy was this. By the 1880s, a single company, Standard Oil, controlled 95% of all oil refining in the U.S. I mean, think about that. That's not just a big business, that is a flat-out monopoly.
So of course, eventually, the government had to step in. But here's the kicker. The big Supreme Court ruling in 1911 didn't exactly kill the giant. It just shattered it into pieces. And those pieces became the huge companies we know today, like Exxon and Chevron. So instead of one giant, you now had a whole family of them, ready to shape global politics for the next 100 years. And this is what set the stage for America's next big move, taking its oil game global.
All right, so after World War II, the U.S. had a big realization. Controlling its own oil wasn't going to be enough. The real prize, the big game, was locking down access to those massive, untouched reserves in the Middle East.
And this, right here, this is the moment it all happens. You've got President Roosevelt and King Ibn Saud on a U.S. warship striking this informal deal. And this deal, it becomes the absolute bedrock of American foreign policy for the next 75 years. It was a really simple but incredibly powerful trade. We'll protect you with our military, you give us reliable access to your oil. Simple as that.
Now, this relationship got even more serious after the big oil crisis in '73. It was formalized into something called the petrodollar system. It's kind of brilliant in its simplicity, really. Here's the deal. Step 1. Saudi Arabia agrees to sell its oil only in US dollars. Step 2. All the other big OPEC nations follow their lead. Suddenly, if you want to buy oil anywhere in the world, you need a whole lot of US dollars. And step 3. All those extra profits, the petrodollars, get reinvested right back into US government bonds. It's this perfect loop that cemented the dollar as the world's go-to currency and tied global finance directly to American power. But there was a huge catch. This new reliance on foreign oil, this whole oil for security deal, well, it created a massive vulnerability, a soft spot. And in the 1970s, that vulnerability was about to be exposed in a really brutal way.
Yeah, the 1973 Arab oil embargo, it just changed everything overnight. Prices didn't just go up, they quadrupled. You had gas lines stretching for miles, and for the very first time, it became crystal clear just how easily the entire American economy could be held hostage by decisions made halfway around the world. So, what was the response? Well, U.S. energy policy basically became military policy. It's called the Carter Doctrine, and it was a huge shift. The U.S. officially declared that access to oil in the Persian Gulf wasn't just about the economy anymore. Nope, it was now a vital national security interest. And what does that mean? It means the U.S. was willing to use military force to protect it.
And believe me, this wasn't just empty words. This doctrine became the actual playbook for U.S. military action in the Middle East for decades. Think about it. The oil embargo leads to creating a strategic reserve.
The Iranian Revolution leads to a bigger U.S. military presence. And when Iraq invaded Kuwait, that led directly to the First Gulf War, all to protect the oil fields. The connection is right there.
So, just when it seemed like America's dependence on foreign oil was here to stay, something started to shift. A quiet technological breakthrough happening right here at home was about to completely redraw the global energy map.
They call it the shale revolution, and man, it was a total game changer, really kicking into high gear around 2010. The tech itself is pretty wild. Hydraulic fracturing and horizontal drilling. Basically, companies could now blast water and sand deep into shale rock, cracking it open to release these huge pockets of oil and gas that we always knew were there, but just couldn't get to. All of a sudden, that whole story of American energy decline, it was about to get a brand new ending.
And the result? Well, just look at this chart. It's stunning. By 2018, less than a decade after this revolution really started, the U.S. just blew past both Saudi Arabia and Russia. It reclaimed its title as the world's #1 oil producer for the first time in ages. Absolutely incredible.
And look, this was so much bigger than just economics. This was a geopolitical earthquake. All of a sudden, Washington had this incredible leverage it hadn't had in 40 years. It could slap tough sanctions on countries like Iran or Russia without having to panic about gas prices shooting up back home. That is a massive foreign policy tool. And it also meant the U.S. wasn't quite as tied to its old allies in the Middle East, which you can imagine changed the whole diplomatic ballgame.
So where does that leave us today? What does this huge American comeback actually mean for the world? Well, in one word, abundance. We've shifted from an age of scarcity to a market that is just flooded with oil.
And this table really tells the story of right now. You've got massive production coming out of the U.S., which is helping keep a lid on prices. In fact, global supply is actually outpacing demand. And what does that do? It forces the traditional players, OPEC and its allies, onto the back foot. They're the ones having to cut production just to stop prices from totally collapsing.
So the big takeaway here, really, is that the U.S. is now the world's swing producer. What that means is its ability to just crank up production basically puts a ceiling on how high prices can go. The power to control the global oil market, it doesn't just belong to a cartel in the Middle East anymore. The game has totally changed.
So it leaves us with this big question, right? With the U.S. now this dominant producer, does that mean the age of oil-driven conflict is over? Or have the players and the rules of the game just changed? America's epic journey with oil proves one thing for sure. Energy is never just about economics. It's always, always about power. The U.S. might not be vulnerable to an embargo like it used to be, but being the top supplier, well, that just creates a whole new set of rules for a very, very old game. Definitely something to think about.